again, and welcome back to Phillies Extra, the baseball podcast from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm Scott Lauber, and I write about the Phillies and Major League Baseball. And no matter if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or watching on Inquirer.com or the Inquirer's YouTube channel, Facebook, X, or Instagram, I want to thank you, as always, for taking some time out of your week to spend with us. My guest this week is nothing less than a Phillies legend. A first-round pick out of high school in 2002, he spent 10 of his 15 Major League seasons in Philadelphia. He ranks fourth in franchise history in strikeouts and starts, and sixth in wins and innings pitched. He was a four-time All-Star and MVP of both the NLCS and the World Series in 2008, and for the first time, his name appears on the Hall of Fame ballot that I received in the mail a few weeks ago. I'm talking, of course, about Cole Hamels. He was our very first guest when we started Phillies Extra back in February, and I couldn't be more excited to have him back here 42 episodes later. We'll talk about his first year in the Phillies broadcast booth, break down how the offseason is unfolding, get his thoughts on the honor of being considered for the Hall of Fame, and a whole lot more. You're not going to want to miss it. But first, let's not bury the lead, as we say in newspaper parlance, because I'm recently back from 3 days in Orlando at the winter meetings, and the big news in the Phillies universe, and really across the sport, is the return of Kyle Schwarber. I referred to it as maybe the most predictable deal of the offseason because I couldn't find anyone anywhere with any team who thought Schwarber would actually sign somewhere else. But it wasn't like he didn't have options, even if they weren't the usual suspects. No, the Dodgers weren't in on Schwarber, neither were the Yankees or the Blue Jays. Despite some reports of interest from the Mets, I have my doubts. But the Pittsburgh Pirates, made a $120 million offer. The Reds, Schwarber's hometown team, tried to bring him back to Southwest Ohio with a 5-year offer. And the Orioles made the strongest bid, 5 years and $150 million. But when Schwarber's agents circled back to the Phillies on the night of December 8th with Baltimore's offer in hand, the Phillies did what everyone thought they would do. They matched it. And Schwarber also did what everyone expected. He accepted. And so we'll have 5 more years of Schwarbombs over Citizens Bank Park. It is the largest contract ever for a full-time designated hitter, dwarfing J.D. Martinez's 5-year, $110 million deal with the Red Sox back in 2018. And it'll cover Schwarber's age 33 to 37 seasons. And if he hits even 32 homers a year, after averaging 46 over the last 4 seasons, he will reach number 500 while wearing a Phillies uniform. But my biggest takeaways were these. Number 1, John Middleton wasn't going to be outbid, not even for a DH who'll be 33 next season, because Schwarber is central to everything the Phillies are and want to be. It goes beyond the fact that he's tied with Shohei Ohtani for second in homers over the last 4 years, behind only Aaron Judge. Schwarber is a serial winner, a former World Series champ with the Cubs, and the consummate leader. He's like crazy glue for the clubhouse, bringing everyone together. Trey Turner and certainly Bryce Harper are bigger stars, but neither commands the room like Schwarber. And as the Phillies begin to incorporate some young players into the mix, Justin Crawford, Andrew Painter, and eventually Aiden Miller, who better to be there for them to follow than Schwarber? Number 2, the Phillies preferred to cap the deal, I think, at 4 years, but their confidence in going to 5 stems from the fact that Schwarber seems to be aging in reverse. Early in his career, he struggled so much against lefties that there were doubts about whether he could play every day, with the Cubs eventually non-tendering him in 2020. This year, he set a Major League record with 23 homers against lefties. In my conversations with team officials, including hitting coach Kevin Long, and do not underestimate the impact of Long's contract extension on Schwarber's decision to come back, the name that comes up most often as a comp for Schwarber is David Ortiz, a DH who hit more than half of his 541 career homers from ages 32 to 40 en route to a spot in Cooperstown. Given the consistency of Schwarber's ridiculous bat speed, people seem to think he can maintain his power in a similar fashion to Big Papi. So Schwarber is back, and the Phillies have a better idea now of which direction their offseason will go. I'll talk about that and more a little bit later in the show, and if you stick with me, I'll take a listener question at the end. Right now, though, let's get to my conversation with one of the very best pitchers in Phillies history. Without further ado, here's Cole Hamels. Cole Hamels, welcome to Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott.
I guess I should say welcome back because you were the first guest on our first show way back in February, and I'm really grateful that you've agreed to come back. And congratulations, too, on being included on the Hall of Fame ballot. It landed in my mailbox a few weeks ago, and even though I expected to see your name, actually seeing it there in print right alongside Jimmy Rollins and Chase Utley was really awesome.
No, you start to look at it and, I think a little bit, more because now it's out there. I was very fortunate to play in front of, and with some greats. And you just look at that and, you kind of wonder like how you have to recognize how great Philadelphia was at, that period of time, but they've had some phenomenal players come through their ranks and play for the city. And then, obviously what they've done even, to continue their careers, but you just look at it, they have 4 Phillies on the ballot right now, which is pretty something special. And, with Roy Halladay getting in a couple of years ago, it's just to recognize what a great organization, a great city to play for.
There's so much I want to get into, especially in regards to the Hall of Fame. But I think given the news of the week, I'd love to get your reaction to the Phillies and Kyle Schwarber finding their way back to each other, right? Like, I don't think anyone in baseball was surprised, but still, it's free agency and anything can happen. What did you think of Schwarber coming back for 5 more years? It's the largest contract ever for a DH. I wonder kind of what went through your mind when you saw that, that deal come through and that it's officially official that he's back.
Yeah, I never doubted, what Schwarber means to the team and what he means to the organization and the city. I didn't think he was going to go somewhere else, but it's the game you have to play. It's understanding free agency. It's understanding, you not wanting to have to think about it during the year. You have agents. But to be able to see it was the first of what the Phillies are really trying to do this offseason and to finally get their guy. I don't think they were going to let him get away. And it's just a testament to John and Dave and Preston. They know who he is as a player. They've had him for a couple of years. I think a lot of organizations who have had him know how special he is, and they didn't want him to go. And for the Phillies to lock him up, they do know it's go time, and this is a person that they need in the clubhouse, and they need him in the lineup. He produces runs, and he's so patient, and especially to see his lines on lefty, because that was something I always favored was, I didn't mind lefties coming up. I knew I was going to succeed more, but Schwarber comes up, he's not the type of guy that you want to see in the box in a big moment, when you're facing him, because he's a tough hitter. So it's good. I think there's going to be a lot of moves that are going to start to kind of roll, but I think he was first. I'm glad it's done. He's a big part of that this organization, and it's good to see for 5 more years.
You played with him for a little while with the Cubs, right? And I'm sure you faced him, or maybe you didn't with the Rangers. Maybe you faced him with the Cubs, but I do kind of wonder because you talk about left on left, and early in his career it was like, can he hit lefties well enough to play every day? And here he didn't have the numbers against lefties. The Cubs non-tender him, and right. He hits 23 homers against lefties this year, which sets a major league record. I mean, I wonder whether, just from like watching him now, it looks different to you than maybe it looked then in terms of like just his approach against lefties and what it looks like as a former pitcher to say, hey, how would I attack that guy now?
No, you're exactly spot on. There were a few holes, early in his career that you could kind of see, and then you just identify and you just have to execute. He would hit the mistake, but now he's a lot more comfortable and confident. He's changed his approach. He's mentioned that too. A lot of it really comes down to is his belief has now turned into confidence. And that as a pitcher, you don't want a confident hitter in the box. He makes it tough for you. And you really look at it is he's going to put up really good at bats. He takes his walks. That's something that's not comfortable with pitchers because you're trying to make him chase. But his approach, you have to really give it to him. That's what it means to be a veteran. And when you're in the league long enough, you figure it out and you then develop a new self. And that's what he does. And you have to really see his work ethic, and just credit him of what he's doing each and every day.
Okay, so Schwarber's back, and the focus shifts now to JT Realmuto. And I can't help thinking back to the 2013-14 offseason when Carlos Ruiz was a free agent. He was 34, going on 35, just like JT is now. And also like JT, all the pitchers love throwing to him. I know you swore by him. Whenever I hear Zach Wheeler talk about JT, I think about you and Chooch and kind of that relationship you guys had. And, the Phillies wound up giving him a third year to bring him back. And I think the intangibles of what he meant behind the plate kind of pushed Ruben in that direction to do that third year. I wonder if you see any similarities to where the Phillies are now with JT, just given what he means to everything that they do on the pitching side of things.
No, you're right, Scott. So the hardest part about a catcher is most of the time you just look at what you can try to perceive as some sort of statistical value, and that's how they hit, how they receive. But there's something else that's really difficult to measure, and that's just his presence and confidence behind the plate in making a pitcher feel good to want to execute and to listen to a game plan, and then adjusting on the fly. And that's something that he's really shown over the last couple of years. I mean, he's been a tremendous, receiver, but, he throws guys out, and you can never count him out with his at bat. And, you got to see that in the playoffs. He comes through in big moments. He's an incredible athlete. And I think that's what is the difference when you look at age. It's how athletic he is. He sets a bar that's a lot different. And then you have to look at what is available. And on the given market, there's not really much available that are comps to him. So he's kind of in the driver's seat. But at the same time, when you have a catcher that is really good and instills confidence in a pitching staff, both the starters and the relievers, you don't want to let those guys get away. And you can see that in all the greatest catchers in the history of the game is you don't let the good ones get away.
The Phillies are in an interesting position. They're coming off 95 and 96 win seasons and back-to-back division titles. And, they're tied with the Dodgers for the most wins in baseball over the last 2 years. And yet, locally, there's this feeling of, they're just running it back, And when I talk to people nationally across the sport, they're like, well, why wouldn't they? I mean, why would you want to change the mix of a team that's this good? A bounce goes their way here or there. Maybe they win that Dodgers series, and we're not talking about a divisional round loss. We're talking about them moving forward. I wonder what your perspective is on that, because there's probably some similarity to the core of your group that was intact and stayed intact for several years after winning the World Series. And there were some additions, there were some subtractions, but yourself, Ryan, Chase, Jimmy, so many of you guys all stayed together and got to stay together into your 30s, and things began to go in reverse a little bit. I wonder kind of where you stand on sort of the keeping this particular core, Harper, Turner, Schwarber, Nola, maybe JT, obviously Wheeler, together to chase a World Series.
Well, the way that I try to look at it is they all, as a group, kind of have a sour taste in their mouth because they have not been able to win together. And I feel like they all look at each other and, want to owe it to each other. And I don't know if that's kind of what you can sort of perceive, but they want to win in Philadelphia. And I know Philadelphia, the fans and the organization want them to win too. This is a really good group of players, and they actually understand the significance of what has happened over the last couple of years and where their goals are and what they're setting their sights for. So I think it gives them a little bit more of a chip on their shoulder, and they look at each other to sort of instill that confidence, but also pick each other up. And that's developed over time. I think that's what's being recognized is, hey guys, we've got to go do this. And like you said, they're always one bounce away, one pitch. That is actually true. I think in this day and age, the training and just the environment of what the Phillies now are able to provide, it makes players last a little bit longer, and they can still stay at a certain level of play. That is kind of what the expectation is. But everybody's in it as a group, and you can see it with this group. And so you have to keep pushing. I think that's the thing is you can never count anybody out. You can't doubt. I think you just keep supporting, and now they have some sort of results that have not been positive that they can use hopefully to get over those humps.
All right, let's talk Hall of Fame. I think I've told you this, and I know I've written it a bunch of times. I don't think we spend enough time celebrating what it means to just be on the ballot. I mean, when you think about how few people actually get to the big leagues in the first place, and then you've got to play at least 10 years to be eligible for consideration. And then there's a screening committee that whittles it down even more. It's like the top 5% all time of players that actually get on that ballot. And so to me, when that ballot comes every year, it's like worth pausing to appreciate the careers of all those guys, regardless of how many votes they're going to end up getting. You know, like last year, Hanley Ramirez didn't get a vote. And good God, he was a tremendous player, right?
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of what makes the Hall of Fame so special are the quality of the players who don't make the cut, you know, who don't get to the 75%. So I wonder if you've been able to step back and just sort of process what it says about the, you know, your achievements in the sport to actually just be on that ballot for the first time. And, you know, I think you're going to end up being on that ballot for years to come, but just kind of what it means to be on that piece of paper.
Well, it really is. I think a lot of us, we all kind of say the same thing. To really be recognized, it's incredibly rewarding for a job that is so humbling. I mean, this job is a career that you fail a lot, and you fail more than everybody else. In order to play that sort of period of time, you had big successes, but you probably failed twice as many times as you had successes. And that's why we were able to create a career out of it. Is we always knew how to get back up, and we always knew how to never doubt ourselves and to keep trying. And that is probably the one thing that happens is when they do put you on the ballot, they send you a letter and you get to read, and you see statistics of percentages. And that is the wildest thing. You're going, oh my gosh, 13% of drafted players, make the big leagues. And then it goes even to a smaller percentage. And we just start to see that, wow, I mean, we were so fortunate to be able to play the game of baseball as a career and a job that we loved as a kid, and it never changed. And now getting recognized, it's a very special moment. And I'm incredibly thankful. I put in a ton of time and effort. My family devoted a ton of time and effort into to try to get to have the career that I had, and then for it to actually be somewhat recognized to be as one of the best ever. It's a small percentage. And just, I look at names that are in the Hall of Fame. I was lucky enough to go there and pitch in the Hall of Fame game. And we took a tour, and just the nostalgia of baseball and what it means to America's pastime. I have a part in that history in certain moments, and I'm lucky to do what I did. I loved every minute of it, and now this is kind of the reward.
So they send you a letter, but then you're on the ballot?
You do, yeah, and you can frame it. And that, I have a really kind of crazy story that a lot of people don't know about, is my mom worked for the Padres before I was born. She was in ticket sales, and she knew a lot of people in the Padres. So when I was born, she was able to get me this contract with the Padres. So I signed an official lifetime contract as a newborn, and it's officially stamped by the commissioner, and it was for $1. So I'm really thankful they didn't uphold that, because that would have sucked. But I mean, I have that, and my mom, and I can frame that. And now to be able to frame a letter from the Hall of Fame to be on the ballot, it's something incredibly special. My family knows about it. Hopefully my kids will see it, maybe further on down the road, more people will be able to see it. But it's just, it's a testament to a lot of the stuff I did, my family dedicated to. We love the game of baseball.
I think one of the things that voters are struggling with, I certainly am, is how to consider starting pitchers, because the goalposts have moved over the years, right? In terms of how far teams let starters go. And, the best of the best from your era aren't going to have the same numbers that the best had from Steve Carlton's era. The best in this era aren't going to put up the numbers that the best from your era did, and so on. So, like, as someone who did it, who stood out there on the mound and competed at the highest level and looked across the field and saw the Verlanders and the Kershaws and the Greinke's and the Scherzers and the Hallidays, like, is there something that you look at that separates the greatest of the great, the best 1%, from even, say, the best 3% or 5%? Because that's really what they're asking us to do, right? Is to take that and, I hate it when you cast your ballot and then someone says, oh, you didn't vote for so-and-so. Well, it's not like a vote against that person. It's just like I'm being asked to dissect, to whittle down 3% to 1%, and it's really hard. I wonder what makes you think hey, that guy I'm looking at there is a Hall of Famer.
No, you said it. There's some weird intangibles that can be measured because you get to see the stats, and then there's some that you don't really measure, but when you were in the game and you're watching the game, you just have a different feel and vibe of what this guy brings to the table and the excitement level and how good he is. That was something that when I would look across the field, I knew this was going to be a really tough game. And I think the hitters, and you can hear the whispers, and you're like, all right, I really have to be on my game. And I'm fortunate to go up against the Roger Clemens, the Smoltz, the Pedro Martinez's, and obviously Verlanders and Kershaws and Scherzer that are going to probably be in and Greinke's. You knew you were facing the best, and you're like, all right, I want to see what I'm made of. And you just battled. And I think that was the joy of baseball, was to battle the best. You just wanted to see where you fell. And some days you didn't have it, but then there were other days you had it and you knew it. And it's just this excitement that you had. I always wanted to go up against the best of the best. I knew it was going to be a fast game if it was, because, I mean, we were going to plug away. Not a lot of runs were going to be scored. There's going to probably be a lot of strikeouts. It's, when you just said it, narrowing 3% to 1% is a very difficult job. It's not a disservice to anybody that doesn't get, the check mark at a certain year or a certain moment. They're all some of the best baseball players that I was fortunate enough to play against, that provided tough at bats or tough games. And it really made me enjoy the game. It's a real difficult thing to look at different eras. But I also think, though, that as human beings, we are always getting better. We're always improving. The best of the best are always rising to the top. And the way I think you look at it is, would a guy in this day and age be able to compete against a Cy Young, pitchers that were back in the days, the Steve Carltons? I think when you look at today's stage in the group that are on there, a lot of those guys would be able to compete, and we were guys that could last. And I think that's what really shows, is you could be at your peak. How long could you be at your peak? And I know that's what you guys try to measure, is, peak of your career. What's that value? I think when anybody's able to play 10 to 15 plus years, there's some serious significant value to that, because they stayed healthy. And I think consistency, and that's what I look at, is consistently, were they able to win games? Were they able to just post up? And I think that goes to even the position players. How many games they play a year, and how many years did they do that? That's a significant number and adds up. It's a lot of wear and tear on the body.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I struggle with, and I know a lot of voters do, is like the length of the career, and then the length of the peak, and also the height of the peak. And there are sometimes I find myself thinking, well, that guy was like, the peak was like astronomical, even if it lasted 8 years as opposed to 10 or 12. So but it's really hard. It's, and like the voting process isn't perfect. We make mistakes. I'll never understand how Johan Santana fell off the ballot after only 1 year.
Right.
But like, one of the things that I like is that it leaves room for discussion. Like, as writers, we're always talking to people in the sport, and maybe I have a conversation with a player or a manager or an executive who brings up something about a player that changes how I've been voting, and I mentioned Jimmy and Chase being on the ballot with you. Chase got to nearly 40% last year, and I think he's going to make another jump. And Jimmy hasn't gotten quite as much momentum. I know how you feel about both of them, but if you had to make like the case for each of them in terms of why they should be in the Hall of Fame, what do you say to someone who's maybe on the fence?
Right. And everybody looks, when you look at a everyday player, everybody's always looking at the offensive categories and what they lined up. But defensively, those two are two guys you wanted behind you. And I think you can ask any pitcher that's ever pitched in the game or pitched against them during that period of time, you wanted those two guys behind you. And especially in the positions that we're at, that were very tough. I mean, there's some of the best players. They were up there the whole time, and they maintain this level of play defensively and offensively. I mean, you look at the stolen bases. Both those guys were a force when they were on base. The stolen base percentages that they had for success. Jimmy, with his MVP year that he had, I've never seen anything like that. I don't think you will. I mean, I get it. Ohtani is in a different league of his own. I mean, that guy's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But Jimmy was putting up numbers that were just unheard of. And then Chase, how consistent he was at second base with his home runs, with his RBIs, the doubles, and then his stolen base percentage. It's really hard to look at and go, how are you guys not going to be in the Hall of Fame? Because we do not win with those guys. We don't win the divisions without those guys. And that's what you have to recognize is during the peak, how good were they on a team, and together it was unheard of.
Yeah, and that's another part, like there's no question that Jimmy and Chase are both Phillies icons, and you can't talk about the history of the franchise without talking about the two of them. I feel the same way about David Wright with the Mets, right? But then you have to weigh that against greatest of all time, and like a Hall of Fame and a Wall of Fame, or a team Hall of Fame, and the so it's hard. There are a bunch of layers to all of this, and there are a lot of great players on this ballot. I think there's 27 of them, and I don't know how many of them are going to get in, but you could probably state your case for just about all of them, and that goes to how great the ballot is and how great you have to be to even get there in the first place.
No, you're right. And I mean, that's the hard part you guys have to shift through. It is tough, but every single one of those players on there deserves the recognition they've gotten. And they have their place in baseball. They were not easy. And I know I can recognize them as some of the best players I've ever played against. And I'm honored to be on the ballot with them. And it is, you start to see these guys now that we're out of the game, you run into them, and you really do. They're great people. On top of that. And, I think the game of baseball, we always need players like that. And so that's for the future generations to see how the greats lead their life, their true character on and off the field. These guys are great guys, every single one of them.
All right, maybe we wrap it up with this. This year also marked your first year in the broadcast booth, working alongside the great Tom McCarthy on Phillies telecasts. Did you enjoy that? What's it like after all those years down on the field to watch the game from a different perspective? And do you have any good stories from year one? It
is different. No, it really is. And to be able to work with T-Mac and Kruk and Ruben and, Ben and Fransky, LA, obviously those guys are in the radio, but we're all together. I used to see these guys all the time on the plane, and we would talk baseball and just hang out. And now to be with them, in another area, it's really nice. They have done such a good job with how to introduce me to this sort of area. Any question I have, they're able to answer. They're able to help me. It's a little bit more fast pace now. I mean, with the time clock. And to fill time talking. So I've gotten a lot better at talking, but it's been good. It's been a tremendous experience. Very, very fortunate to be able to do it. And, I'm learning. And I think that's what I try to tell people is I'm trying to learn. I want to be good at it. And I just didn't know where to take it. And so, I'm really pleased and happy, people have been, the response they've had towards me and what I'm trying to do. And it is, I'm just really trying to learn where I can be useful and what other type of part of the game that I can play, and just providing a good viewing and just good information for the fans.
So spring training, I don't know if it was your first game, was one of your first games. For people who don't know, like the starters come out of the game, especially early in spring training, they come out of the game super early, like 3 innings in or 4 innings in, the starting pitcher, same way. And we get to go in the clubhouse during the game to talk to them before they leave, usually before the end of the game. And so we're down in the clubhouse, the TV's on, the broadcast is on, the sound is up. And at one point you say to it's like the 6th or 7th inning. And at one point you say to T-Mac, like, I don't think I've ever been at a spring training game this long before. And I laughed out loud in the clubhouse. And I said, that's probably true. Like, as far as you're concerned, there's nothing after you're done, right? I mean, you go in, you get your treatment, your arm care, and you're off, probably beat the traffic. So that had to be kind of a fun experience to kind of see it from the other side of things, right? Rather than from just what you were used to all the time.
No, it is. And just paying attention to the game. I've actually learned a little bit more about the game just by watching, how, certain teams are coming in, what manager, are making moves and why. I mean, I never paid attention to that because I was so focused on what I had to do as a teammate, with when I played and when I didn't play, it's like, hey, you're talking baseball to players and you might see something and you're helping them. But now there's a bigger part of the game, and there's moves and what you're really trying to get at, and how much thought actually does go into the stats and matchups. And that's kind of the part that I've learned. And I've actually really kind of learned something a little bit more new and enjoying the game. And now just trying to figure out where I can put some sort of voice and expertise into something.
Well, that's the team for you to watch too, because I mean, like the lefties in the rotation, they had 3 lefties last year in the rotation. You get Sanchez who throws a changeup. That's something I'm sure that you watch and you see and you think back to your changeup, right? How does his changeup stack up to yours?
Oh, his is electric. What he's able to do, because he throws that 2-seamer and that changeup, and that's the one thing I noticed, is you cannot recognize the spin, and it's the same. So it's a coin flip. You're picking 50-50. Am I going to try to hit 97 miles an hour with sink, or am I going to hit 87 with just drop off the table? He really has the same arm action, and he keeps it, and how he positions it. When he throws it in the counts, he's not scared to throw it in any type of count with anybody on. That's what I recognize. And that's when somebody has a really good pitch, is when they can utilize it and not have fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, I mean, it's, they're built around their pitching. They're going to be built around it again. It's so much fun to talk pitching with you, to hear you talk pitching on the broadcasts. And it was fun as always to have you here. I know it's the off season. I know you're always busy. You got your kids at home and the work you do here in Philly, in and out of town all the time. So you're such a great friend of the show, and I'm really grateful that you can squeeze some time in to be with us. So thank you again for hopping on with Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer.
No, thanks for having me, Scott. Look forward to another one.
I want to thank Cole Hamels again for joining me. It's time now to open the reporter's notebook. And since we try to keep this show as evergreen as possible, I'd like to focus on something that I was thinking about a lot during the winter meetings and will continue to think about well into next season. When the Phillies re-signed Kyle Schwarber, I saw a lot of reaction, mostly on social media, that went something like this. It's great that the Phillies are keeping their 56-homer slugger and the leader of their clubhouse. He's invaluable to them for those reasons and more. But man, it really feels like they're just bringing back the band. And look, I mean, it's undeniable, right? 4 players, maybe 5, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Aaron Nola, and now Schwarber, and probably Christopher Sanchez, are going to be under contract through at least 2030. And it isn't a young roster either. Harper, Schwarber, Turner, and Nola will be 33 next season. If JT Realmuto comes back, he'll be 35. Zach Wheeler will be 36. But you also don't just blow up a team that won 96 games this year, 95 last year, and 90 the year before. The Phillies are tied with the Dodgers for the most wins in baseball over the last 2 years. And yeah, the Dodgers took out the Phillies in the NLDS, but most of those 4 games were so close that the Phillies were a tush-push away from getting over the top. Look, if you want to tell me that they need to do more to change the mix, so to speak, go right ahead. It's a reasonable argument. But something Dave Dombrowski said the other day stuck with me. He said, and I quote, "We need to start working our young players into the roster." In fact, Fangraphs cited a stat a couple of months ago that only 24 players have made their major league debut with the Phillies since the start of the 2022 season. Only the Yankees and Braves have had fewer. 12 of those 24 Phillies debuts came in 2022, which means there have been only 12 in the last 3 years. And of those dozen, how many made much of an impact? Johan Rojas and Orion Kerkering stand out from the NLCS push in 2023. Otto Kemp this year. But I asked Dombrowski if there's a reason why the Phillies have had so few major league debuts. Have they been overly conservative about graduating players from AAA to the majors? Is it a function of having a veteran-laden roster? And he said, I think it's a combination. He noted that the Phillies have traded away some young players who could have contributed, such as Matt Vierling after the 2022 season and Mick Abel this year. He also pointed out that 5 of the Phillies' last 6 first-round picks came from high school. Abel, Andrew Painter, Justin Crawford, Aiden Miller, and Dante Nori, which means that their path to the majors was a little bit longer. Painter, of course, missed a couple of years because of Tommy John surgery, which has delayed his arrival. But, Crawford and Painter are almost certain to be on the opening day roster. And the Phillies are signaling that Miller could be close behind on an accelerated schedule. I'd be surprised if Gage Wood, this year's first-round pick, gets to the big leagues in 2026, but he's probably going to move quickly through the system. There isn't a player Dombrowski has praised more often this offseason than Kemp, whom he described the other day as, quote, a championship-type player. You know, if the Phillies trade Alec Bohm, in part to free up $10 million to help strengthen another area of the roster, like the outfield maybe, I wouldn't be surprised to see Kemp take over as the everyday third baseman, at least or until Miller is ready. And if it wasn't clear before the Phillies brought back Schwarber and made an offer to re-sign Real Muto too, as they wait, nothing that happens this offseason is going to be as important as the continued maturation of Crawford, Painter, and eventually Miller. Because it's one thing to bring back the band and allow Harper, Turner, Schwarber, Nola, and maybe Real Muto to age together. It's another thing entirely to realize that the Phillies' long-term success beyond 2027, when Zach Wheeler said he intends to retire, is tied to how good Crawford, Painter, Miller, and Wood are going to be. And that, to me, is the storyline that will be most worth watching in spring training and throughout the entire 2026 season. Okay, it's time to play Hit and Run, where we take a question from you out there. Want to join the conversation? Drop me an email at slauber@inquirer.com or reach out on the social media platform of your choice, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, or you can always drop a line in the comments section on YouTube as well. This week's question comes from Rob at Third Shift Rob on X, who asks, anything new on the Castellanos front as far as possible trade destinations? Thanks, Rob, for the question. So the short answer is that Nick Castellanos' situation, like everything else about baseball's offseason, continues to evolve and develop. Here's what I know. The Phillies have shopped Castellanos since the GM meetings last month, maybe even before that. And David Dombrowski has been transparent as can be. When I asked him last month, he said he spoke to Castellanos after the season about the benefits of a change of scenery. He reiterated that at the winter meetings when he said, quote, we've talked about trying to find a change of scenery for Nick. So it's clear to everyone on all 30 teams that Castellanos will be playing somewhere else next year. The question is where and how much, if any, of his $20 million salary will the Phillies be able to unload? The answer might not come until almost the start of spring training. I always think it's helpful to think of the offseason as a giant game of musical chairs. You have X number of teams who are looking to fill a particular need, in this case, a right-handed hitter to play a corner outfield spot or maybe be a DH. Well, when the music stops at the beginning of February and everyone heads to spring training, a few teams are inevitably left short, right? The Orioles just got Pete Alonso, which means the Mets, and the Red Sox did not. Maybe the Red Sox turned back to Alex Bregman, which would leave other teams to look for alternatives, and so on down the line. I was talking with someone at the winter meetings, and we were wondering about a team like the Pirates. They made a $120 million offer to Kyle Schwarber. Where do they pivot now? And what if their next target turns them down? And the one after that, and maybe the one after that. Maybe they're eventually in a position where they say, hey, we'll take Nick Castellanos, especially if the Phillies pay down most of the salary and hope that he can hit 20 to 25 home runs for us. And I think that's where the Phillies stand. They'll kind of follow the game of musical chairs and wait for someone to be left standing at the end. And if the music stops and still nobody is willing to trade for Castellanos, well, at that point, the Phillies probably release him. But they're certainly going to wait out the market as long as it takes before just dumping him. It's not that they expect to get much of a return, but the outlook for some teams on February 12th will look a lot different than it does on December 12th, and interest in Castellanos might reflect that. I hope that answers your question, Rob. Thanks again for submitting it. Let's leave it there for this week and tell you that most episodes of Phillies Extra are available by going to Inquirer.com and clicking on the Inquirer Live tab, or on the Inquirer's YouTube page. That's an easy way to catch up on any shows that you've missed. You can also listen to this episode and most others on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And while you're there, please give us a follow and rate and review us. Thanks again, of course, to my guest, Cole Hamels, for answering the bat signal this week. Thanks, too, to Mariam Akraz for helping us put everything together, and to John Roberts for helping out as well. It isn't easy when I spend half the week traveling to and from Orlando, so Mariam and John always come up clutch with their flexibility. But most of all, thanks to you out there for listening, watching, and of course reading the Philadelphia Inquirer. Have a great